Hello and welcome everybody to Thread Hunting, a hands-on introduction. This is episode 6, and we are going to be looking for anomalies in execution pathways. So when I think about execution pathways, I can't help but think about parent and child relationships. But sometimes odd things happen. For instance, thinking of the stork, does Peter Pan have any parents? Peter Pan's interesting. He's fantastic. And I like to think a little mischievous too. So we want to look for the Peter Pans in our on our hosts, the things that don't quite have a home, but are worth investigating. Okay, so do all processes have a parent? Did something start everything? All right, let's not get too existential here, but generally, yes. Next, do some processes only spawn other processes? All right, what's normal? Again, we're doing anomalies, so we have to start thinking about tuning what is out of the ordinary for my environment. All right, so these are some things we're going to think about. Process IDs are important. A process ID is essentially a number that an operating system gives to a process that starts running, so it can keep track of it. Now, if each process has its own ID, then when a new process starts, we should be able to track the process ID of what started it, what its parent is. So if we have childs, we can look at the parent PID and try to figure out where it came from. Okay, so we're going to use this slightly rough script that maybe I wrote called Parse this month. So bring it down, vet it if you like, and let me show you kind of how it's going to work, okay? You're going to copy the code into something like, I don't know, PowerShell ISE, which is one of my favorites. So let's go to Show Script pane. So you'll paste it into here, okay? So here's what it'll look like. Right. Again, suggestions are welcome, or if you just want to go to make it better, that's pretty darn cool too. Once it's in there, you're going to hit the green button and it's going to run it. And once you do that, then you will be able to use the function parse sysmon. And there it is. Okay. Its one argument is it takes a file, right? You have to give it a file path, which will be your evtx file. So if we head back over to our slides, it'll be your file path. All right. Now, because we want to look for interesting things, we have to have something malicious to look at. So for this example, I clicked on everything you're not supposed to click on. So I ran a generic Trojan that actually threw up an error for driver files, did a malicious PowerShell script, ran a remote access Trojan, ran TrickBot. I ran it all, and those are the timestamps. So bam, 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 right after each other. So I've got the sysmon logs for these executions. So let's see if we can find them. 2, if we can observe something malicious about the execution pathway. And play around with some sysmon logs. Okay. Let's see what we can do. Now, PowerShell, not everyone's favorite, but I use it a lot because I use a lot of Windows. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these commands so you can kind of get a feel for what we're doing. And that way, maybe you can jump from that in the future. So taking a look over here, this is our, let's go back. There we go. And there we go. So the $malware is the variable holding our event logs. The pipe, right, is saying, hey, for every one of those event logs, I want you to do something to it. So our first one here is group. So what we're saying is, hey, I want you to look through all of those events and I want you to group them together based on the property command line. So what this will do is it'll look for every command line that's in there and it'll show it to us. Next, we do select property name. That's going to clean it up so we only see the command line and not the rest of the event file. So that's what that one looks like. The next one is we're doing something slightly different. We are going to do malware where there is a property called image. Okay, and then we want to select the parent image and the image. We talked about execution pathways. So the parent image is going to be the parent process, the process that spawned the next one. And that's going to give us a child-parent relationship, okay, an execution pathway. All right, next one is very similar. And this time we're going to also look at the user to see if we find something different within it. And the one at the bottom, we're going to make sure there is a property hash, and we're going to group by it along with the description. And again, the select property name and pipe FL, which stands for format list, makes it cleaner to look at. So these are some things we're going to do to hunt for anomalies inside of our sysmon logs. Okay, so let's give these guys a try. Alrighty. Okay, so we'll do our first one. So I already imported it from the last one. So I've got a malware variable. Now we're gonna pipe it and we're gonna do group by property command line. Select property name. Again, this last part just cleans it up a little bit. Let's see what we get. All right. So we've got all kinds of stuff. So let's just kind of wander through it a little bit. What have we got? So that is obviously one of the malicious files that got downloaded and opened. We see a lot of MSI exec. Scroll over a little bit. We see some W script. And we can get a little better example of what these are. They're a little chopped. Let's see if I can help with it. There we go. We're gonna run that file again. Let's see. I'm gonna do format list again just to clean it up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to scroll to the top. Now these are only command. What? And that one stands out. All right. Oh, some of these do too. Look at that. Okay, that looks like it could be definitely malicious. We see some W script for px.js. Again, that definitely looks a little on the fishy side. We've got some MSI exec, a whole lot of file with a lot of switches on it. All right, so I would say right away, just by looking at command lines, we have some strange stuff going on. All right, so we've got something we could kind of look for. Oh, this is interesting. Stop win defend. Oh, you can also see me loading TrickBot right before it. Wonder what that could be. Some set preference. We saw that in another slide. Whole slew of them. And it's a pretty interesting file name. So right now, all we're looking at are command lines. And so I think command lines are kind of interesting to do anomaly hunts on, just because as you learn the tools and the switches, you can get a feel for the level of malice that might be there or worth investigating. All right, so let's try the next one. And just so we don't get truncated again, I'm going to do the format list on the end, okay? So again, we're going to select just the parent image and the next image. So we're looking for some execution pathways. All right, we will scroll a bit. A lot of explore with no parent. Let's see. Looking for something kind of on the juicy side. Okay, here's something. Not necessarily really malicious, but it is definitely a execution pathway worth looking at when command line launches PowerShell. Because some might argue, if you're an administrator, aren't you just going to launch PowerShell on your own? Okay. Let's see what else we have. Here's kind of a strange one. An executable with nothing but question marks running command. Anything that runs a prompt is worth tuning and looking into. Lots of those. Lots of those. Okay, here's another good one. Here's command line running SC, which I think is service creation. All right, and that's used to create a service on your computer. Not something a normal user will do. So that could be an execution pathway worth looking into. Okay, here's another good one. So rat.exe, which we know is malicious, ran scheduled tasks. All right, so it's good to know in your environment what will run a scheduled task, okay? Because that's how you create persistence on a machine. So that's a good execution pathway to take a look at. Oh, here's a great one. Yeah, this is pretty fantastic. WScript, which will run things like JavaScript code, is running PowerShell. That doesn't usually happen. Again, tune in your environment, but for majority of places, you won't see that. So that's another good parent-child relationship or execution pathway to look for. Could be interesting. MSI exec running a temp file. Here we've got something from a downloads folder running another program from App Data Local. That's pretty strange. That's definitely worth looking for. Okay, so I think we kind of have an idea of some strange execution pathways to take a look at by looking at the parent and the child. That being said, let's not forget malware authors are super creative and very savvy. So different techniques will make it look like there is no parent relationship. So that's kind of interesting. Something to watch for too. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't hunt for execution pathway anomalies. Just know that it won't catch everything. All right, let's try our next one. This is really similar to the last one, so I'm just going to do an up, and we're going to add user to it. We're going to see if anything else pops up that might be of interest. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is a lot of malware will escalate privileges to run as a service. Let's see if we can find an example of that. Scroll, 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 scroll. Okay, so we've got system running PowerShell without a parent image. Definitely something to point out. I don't know how malicious it's always going to be. This is what I'm looking for. So here we've got system that's running command and then PowerShell as an elevated prompt. Some similar things over and over again. Here's another one, system running a strange executable with a command prompt. So if it's system, it's got complete control over the system, and I guess that makes sense. But it means it can do whatever it wants. So looking at user and bringing it into the execution pathway kind of story or hypothesis can be kind of useful too. All right, let's try another one. Now this one we're going to take a look at hashes. This is kind of a throwback to our last video. It was looking at binaries. I will say it helps if you spell your variables correctly. All right. All right, so we might want to look for something kind of strange in here. That stands out a little bit, so we could check the hash somewhere. Here's the question mark file name with no description. All right, that one stands out. It's a little out of the ordinary. So, again, something to look for anomalies if you have the visibility. All right, so we talked about PIDs. All right, so now let's see if we can do something with that. So we're back to PowerShell. So now we have the, let's do format list on that. Okay, so now we've got the parent process ID, right? Using that, we can then pivot and take a look at what other things that parent process ID might have done. So interesting here, we're also pulling up other stuff, like some web traffic that Sysmon noticed. So, okay, here's a bad one. This is related to TrickBot. So we know the parent process ID is 3708. So we can pivot to see if that parent process maybe did something else. So let's, I don't know, let's give that a little try. Let's see if we pick something up on it. Okay, I'm going to use a new operator here, EQ, which means equal. And we're going to throw that in there. And we're going to do format list. So this is going to be any process ID that equals the one we know that's malicious. All right, so this one did a lot of stuff. So apparently, if you're doing DFIR work, or if you're hunting and you're trying to find the root cause of something, these parent process IDs can be really useful to see what else happened on a busy system. So these all happened by that one process, the parent process. So yeah, pretty fascinating. Another good way to hunt. All right, so back to good old hypotheses, which is kind of hard to say sometimes. When blank is a parent process and blank is a child process, this could be malicious. All right, now we're trying to narrow down our hunt so we don't waste our time. So take a moment, pause me, write down some ideas, think about it, and let's take a look at an example. Okay, so when a file from the app data directory is the parent process of the command, and the child process of command is PowerShell, this is worth your time to look at. For instance, that is an example of how maybe you could find it or something we looked at. Video summary. So you want to understand parent processes, why they're useful, and what you can tell from them. So the more malicious execution pathways like the ones we looked at, the better you're going to be able to find malicious activity because you've seen them before. And study practicing sysmon logs and logs in general. The more you see it, the easier it'll be able to find bad. Excellent. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you tune in to the next episode. Thanks.